Hello, this is Alan from lifestogood.net. Thank you for watching another one of our business model series presentations. Welcome to the second presentation in the Life's Too Good business model presentation series. In case you didn't get to see the first presentation, which was all about team development and the forming, storming, norming, performing concept, then I'm going to tell you just how you can do that, just where you can find that presentation at the end of this one. Today's presentation is probably going to be quite brief. It's all about Maslow's hierarchy, as you can see from the screen. What am I going to go through today? So I'm going to give you a very brief introduction. We will then take a look at the hierarchy, i.e. a diagrammatic form. I'll then tell you a little bit more about how Maslow wanted the hierarchy to be used, because that's quite important in his writings and some talks that he's done, which I might try and find some links to actually to put in the article on the website. The more you read about Maslow, it's clearly not his intention that you just take this model and use it as if these are the only things that apply at each level and the only needs we've got. We'll talk about that more in a second. We'll look at each of the 5 levels in a little bit more detail, but as I said before, it's a pretty simple model. It's pretty obvious, so I'm not going to read through every word. And then we'll have a look at the application of the model. Again, this should be quite a quick presentation because the application is quite simple too, as are the questions and actions at the end. But we'll go through the whole usual sections that we go through in these presentations and see where we get to. So, the model was first proposed by Abraham Maslow in 1943. It was proposed in a paper, I think it was called The Theory of Motivation, and then he fully expressed it in a book where he wrote more about motivation in 1954. So it's quite an old model. If you read up on it, if you look around online about this model, or read any books on it, more recent works on the model, you will probably find, as I did, that people generally think it still applies. I mean, it's quite a conceptual model. There have been lots of variations of the model, but it really does apply to life today and to business. The way the model works, we have some basic needs, which Maslow calls deficiency needs. And only when we satisfy those basic needs can we move on to what he calls being needs, which are in fact the one level of the model, the self-actualization level, which is level 5. Apart from the very basic needs we have, which is level 1, our physical and physiological needs, any of the other deficiency needs, any of the first 4 levels which are not met, you don't get a physical indication of that, but you would feel anxious and tense. So basically, the theory suggests that at the most basic level, needs have to be met before an individual will strongly desire to move on to more elaborate and higher level needs. So here is the model. You will see out there various representations of the model, but they're all quite similar. It's normally represented by a pyramid. This particular diagram is from Wikipedia, but go and have a look in Google Images. You'll see lots of diagrams which look very, very similar. So there are 5 levels, as you can see: physiological, safety, love, belonging, esteem, self-actualization. So, first of all, I did say I would talk about how the model should be used, a little bit more about the model and Maslow's own interpretation of it. So, he talks about meta-motivation and being needs. These are the ultimate needs at the top of the pyramid. Meta-motivated people are people who are driven by being needs, which is level 5 of the model, instead of deficiency needs. So if you imagine we've got the first 4 levels are effectively deficiencies. We're missing something. If we've satisfied all of those deficiencies, only then can we move on to looking after our own being and our own fulfillment. Another point is that the human mind and brain are complex, and we have lots of things going on in our heads, in our mind, all at the same time. So in actual fact, in reality, there are many different motivations from very many different levels of Maslow's pyramid occurring at the same time. He was very clear when speaking about these different levels and their satisfaction in terms such as relative, general, primarily, very subjective terms when he talks about the model. So he's very clearly saying that this model shouldn't be taken literally, but is used to understand how people generally progress as more basic needs are met and they move on to satisfy more complex needs. So on to the levels. So the basic level, physiological level, are the basic requirements for human survival. If our basic needs aren't met, the human body simply can't continue to function. Air, water, food are metabolic requirements for survival in all animals, including humans. Clothing and shelter provide necessary protection from the elements. So, very simply, if you don't have your basic needs met, if you haven't got a roof over your head, if you've got no clothes, if you've got no water, you're hardly going to be looking at very complex self-fulfillment. You're going to try and meet those basic needs first. Once our physical and physiological needs are satisfied, the next level is looking at our safety. Our safety could be in terms of physical safety, threats from war, natural disaster, violence. It could also be economic safety. So if we are worried about a threat to our livelihood, we look for job security. This is why we have grievance procedures in place in the workplace to guard against unfair treatment of employees. This is why people have savings accounts that they can call upon on a rainy day. So safety and security needs include personal security, financial security, health and well-being. Then we move on to love and belonging, or social needs. Everybody wants to feel loved, and look, a human being is a social being, so we need to feel a sense of belonging and acceptance, whether that's from a large social group, a club, or small social connections like friends and family. In the absence of these elements, you may feel loneliness, you may get social anxiety, and in the worst case, clinical depression. Another point to make is we're starting to get into some areas here where we have exceptions to the model. So a child which is treated badly or has abusive parents can be known to override the more basic needs with these needs. So even if a child has safety issues, in that case, they could skip straight to level 3. Or an anorexic might ignore the need to eat and security for a feeling of control and belonging. The next level is esteem. So esteem is the normal human desire to be accepted and valued by others. So people crave recognition at different levels, and this level is talking about a need to have a sense of contribution, whether it's through a profession or a hobby. Imbalances can result in low self-esteem or an inferiority complex. And the irony here is people with low self-esteem look to others. They need respect from others. They might even look for fame or glory, which depends on others. We can get into quite a deep psychological discussion here about things like insecurity, and I don't know if you've heard the term imposter syndrome, but that's quite an interesting concept, which would be a bit of an aside in this presentation, but that's the kind of area we're talking about here. The interesting thing is, when people do have low self-esteem, they're not going to be able to improve their view of themselves, no matter how much fame, respect, and glory they receive externally. The only way to address it really is if they accept themselves internally. So it's about self-respect and self-esteem more than it is about any kind of external recognition. Just to continue that notion, Maslow actually talked about two versions of esteem needs, a lower one and a higher one. So the lower one is the need for respect of others, and the higher one, you guessed it, is the need for self-respect, so internal respect. The second one is the more important of those because it relies more on inner competence and confidence in your own skin and through experience. Maslow also states that these two hierarchies are interrelated rather than sharply separate. So again, we have an example of a recognition there that this model isn't set in stone, that as we get into these more complex needs, levels 4 and 5, it's not a linear thing. The point there is that this level of need, as well as the next highest level, are not strict separate levels but closely related to others. Again, the way to look at the model is these are the things we generally move through, but we're not always talking about one need at a time. The final level, level 5, is self-actualization, and this level is talking about fulfillment, so what a person's full potential is and realizing that potential. Maslow describes this desire as the desire to become more and more what we are, what we're destined to become, what we're capable of becoming. This is a broad definition when Maslow's talking in terms of self-actualization, but when it's applied to individuals, this need is specific. So an individual might have a very specific self-actualization need. One individual might have a strong desire to be rich, another individual might have a strong desire to be super fit, and another may have a strong desire to be extremely charitable or extremely artistic. Whatever that fulfillment desire is really an individual thing. So we talked about levels 4 and 5 being more complex needs and being more related to the other levels. We talked about how individuals can progress through the different levels. We talked about, which is not shown on the diagram, the first 4 levels being deficiency needs and the last one being a being need. So that's it really, that's the model in total. Let's talk a little bit more now about application of the model, a little bit more about understanding the model and where it applies in our everyday lives today. Okay, I'm not going to spend too long on this page. I'm just going to give you some very quick case studies and some very quick practical examples. I want you to consider the Apple Store. The Apple Store, the one in bricks and mortar, not the one on your device, is very much built around customer experience, around the love and belonging need. Facebook is entirely, the business model is entirely based on the love and belonging need and social need. The media at all different levels may play on different needs that we have. They might have a campaign which tugs at our safety needs to make us feel more secure and therefore have to take a certain course of action or follow a certain or be more drawn to a certain news item. Marketing experts can again address us with any level of need, whether it's a self-esteem need or a safety need. Some practical examples. You can't expect someone to want to take a new challenge outside their comfort zone, which is the top level, if they don't feel good about themselves. So they're not going to want to try something new. They won't feel confident enough if they don't have enough self-esteem. And then the bottom of those, you can't expect someone to turn up for work if they've got no clothes, or if they've got no home, if their physical needs aren't being met. They're going to address that first before they turn up for work. Okay, so I hope that's helped to clarify precisely how this model applies. It really does apply all over the place in life and in business, and it might not be really obvious, but just think about it conceptually. If we address these needs, and businesses do this all the time, this is why we have flexible work arrangements, this is why we think about ergonomics at our desk, this is why we think about people being comfortable at work, this is why people have career plans, this is why more and more these days there are workers' rights. All of these things relate to the model. So hopefully that's helped. Just finally, think about, are there situations you've been in where your basic needs have gotten in the way of your more complex needs? Do you agree with the model? One thing I didn't cover, which I'll talk about very briefly now, there have been some criticisms of this model, but on the whole, it's a very well accepted model. There have been other versions of the model as well, where instead of 5 levels, there are 7 levels or 8 levels. I deliberately haven't put those in this presentation because in both cases, the extra levels would all be in the 5th level of Maslow's model, in the self-actualization level. All of those extra levels are really doing in those other models is breaking down different levels within the self-actualization level. So I would personally come back to this model as the original and the best, a fundamental model which is easy to use and apply. So do you agree with the model? I did promise you I'd tell you where you can find the first presentation. That is the forming, storming, norming, performing model, and you can find that by going to lifestoogood.net/BMP1. This presentation is going to be lifestoogood.net/BMP2. No prizes for guessing what the next presentation is going to be called.